Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Alaikum salam. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Sorry, guys. I'm just trying to do something on my computer here. Okay. Okay, how's everyone this week? I hope you're all well and healthy and families are good. So we are into week 9. Continuing with our discussion on qualitative data analysis. Okay, so we will have a presentation tonight on the concept of data saturation. Maybe I should just wait a minute or two and let everybody get online. So did anybody have any problems uploading the assignment for today, the positionality statement? For those of you who haven't done it yet, you still have until 12 o'clock midnight tonight to do it. So fear not, there's still time. So how did you find writing the statement? Was it hard? Anyone want to comment on that? How did you find the statement? Hard to write? No one wants to comment? Nobody wants to share your experience? You're supposed to be qualitative research students. You're supposed to like to express yourselves and speak and describe and Hi, Siraju. So, Siraju, are you ready to present tonight?
Hello, Prof. Yes, I will present today, inshallah.
And you are presenting with who again?
Yeah, Muhammad Fadli.
Fadli, okay.
My humble self, Siraju Muhammad.
Okay.
Prof.
Yes, okay, okay.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. So, how was the personality statement? The positionality statement. Somebody who, I forget who it was, somebody wrote me earlier, asked me about the personality statement. It's actually called positionality statement. It's a statement describing your position to your study, where you position yourself in relation to your study and the study population of focus, the target population. So it's your positionality statement, not personality statement. So come on, somebody share. What was it like? Was it hard? Easy? What was hard about it? What was easy about it? Wow, nobody has anything to say. Oh, wow. Okay, maybe we're at that point in the semester where people are just kind of tuned out. Okay, anyway. Oh, sorry. Yes.
Oh, here. Yes, I found when I wrote my statement, I found the part of system of operation is hard for me.
To write about in your statement.
Yes, I found the system of operation is hard for me.
How does that relate to your positionality statement?
Because when I first write about this question, you give us a guide, right?
Uh-huh.
When I
read
this
you don't,
question,
of course, you don't have to write if that doesn't relate to your particular situation. You don't have to necessarily write about that. Those are just questions to think about, to consider. But of course, if it doesn't relate to you or to your study, then of course you don't have to include that.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because oftentimes qualitative studies, especially if they are using critical theory approach in particular, which is quite popular now, especially in the social sciences in the West. Qualitative studies often deal with not, I want to say challenging is not the right word, but addressing things like oppression and marginalized experiences of marginalized groups and stuff like that. So, like in the example I showed last week, of, for example, being immigrants from the Middle East coming to America, they have to deal with certain challenges related to their ethnic background and so forth. So those questions do come into play with some studies, but not all studies. So, of course, you have to relate it to your own study and your own situation. So, okay, that's I'm glad you raised that. Okay, so, but it does at least cause you to think, gives you reason to think about it at least. Anybody else have any reactions to the positionality statement? A lot of people tend to have difficulty writing about themselves. Did you find that was the case?
Yeah, it was for me because I think when I was doing the positionality statement, I had to be very honest towards myself because I had to really think about how do my personal background really relate to what I'm doing for my research. So yeah, I think that was the most the honest thing that I have to write, because normally we had to think everything inside our mind, right? But this one I have to actually write it down in few paragraph about what I actually think about my research. Yeah, so I believe that it was a very good experience for me to think like how it actually relate towards my study. So yeah, thank you, Prof, for giving us the assignment. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Shara, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned that about writing, because writing can be a very powerful tool for helping us think, actually, to think through things. I know a lot of students, they have this attitude as sort of like sometimes that these types of things, a positionality statement and then reflexivity, oh, it's just going to slow me down. I just want to finish as fast as possible. Why do I have to do this? Is this really relevant? Is this really important for the study? And you have to really be careful of that kind of an attitude, because that kind of an attitude will definitely result in your work. It'll show up in your work, in the kind of work you do. Okay, so there's really not a lot of shortcuts in research. If you're doing PhD and you're looking for shortcuts all the time, I would just say find something else to do. Don't waste your time, because it's just not the kind of project that you want to be, trying to find, shortcuts to finish. It's just there aren't many. It's not that kind of an activity. So, and these types of things, positionality statements and reflexivity and documentation of a lot of the mental and psychological work that goes into a study. Yeah, these are things that do take up time, and they do require added work and stuff. So, but that's the reality of doing, good qualitative research. And we're getting, and sorry to say, but I've had several qualitative vivas recently that ended up in reviva, resubmission, because students are submitting half-baked work. It's excuse me, it's really sad, but it's becoming more and more prevalent, this idea that just got to do it fast, and then they submit, and then got to resubmit, you have another year to go. It's like shooting yourself in the foot. I literally had a viva last week where the students submitted their thesis and the chapter 3 was still written in proposal form. They had not yet gone back and revised the chapter 3 to reflect what they actually did in the study. It's still written as a proposal. And I was ready to fail her. I was ready to fail her. And it was quite frustrating because that should not happen. That should not happen. And it's not only the student's fault, it's also the supervisory committee's fault for something like that to happen. Okay, so I don't know how I got into the tangent of this in relation to Shahira's comment. But Shahira, no, you raise a good issue. The fact that we have to, doing qualitative research, we have to be in tune and aware of our own, where we're coming from, our assumptions and our biases. And the best way to go about doing that is to write it out. All right, so positionality statement is very therapeutic in a lot of ways as well. It'll bring you face to face with what it is that you're studying, and it'll force you to really look at it critically, which is what we have to do in qualitative PhD work. Okay, so I'm glad you had that experience, Shahira, and I'm sure it'll come out in your statement. When I read it, I'm sure I'll see that, those things that you struggle with, I'm sure I will see that in your work. All right, so that's a good experience to have. Okay, so anyway, thank you for sharing that. So let's just quickly jump to the agenda for today. Okay, so tonight's class, I just mentioned positionality statements are due, and then we're going to have a reading presentation. Now, this article tonight is, I think it's another very useful article that really, I think, really explains and illustrates what saturation is and what it looks like in qualitative research, at least from a grounded theory perspective. So if you're doing a study on grounded theory, you get a really nice view, really nice perspective on what saturation looks like, and then how it's described, and then how it's illustrated in your thesis. Now, of course, you can take a lot of the lessons from this article and apply it to your own study, even if you're not doing grounded theory, and that's the whole point. Okay, but it's another really good, I think, example of how to do that. Like I said earlier, I try to choose articles that are practical for students, the ones that you can directly apply in your own work, your thesis work. And so this is another really good one. In fact, the tables that he uses, I highly, highly recommend that you use very similar types of tables to illustrate how you achieve saturation in your thesis. Okay, and then after the break, we're going to have our in-class activity tonight. We're going to begin to develop, do some coding, do some analysis, and begin to develop the beginning of a code book based on our discussion last week. Okay, as I asked in the WhatsApp group, I hope you were able to download the class exercise transcripts from Positivistic, because tonight we'll be starting at least with Michelle's interview and maybe one of the others, just depending on how much time we have. Okay, so if you didn't get a chance to do that, maybe you can do it during the break. Okay. All right, so are there any questions before we turn it over to our presenters? Comments, concerns? In terms, sorry, just before we start, your assignment 3, I've gone through your interview critiques. That assignment is pretty much just extra credit for everyone. Pretty much everyone got full credit for that. I didn't really teach anything about interviews this time around in this class. So it's really just to expose you to that, those 2 examples, and just to give you the exercise of going through and really being able to compare and contrast and look at and observe and critique those 2 interviews. And you pretty much all did that, so there's no issue with. So I'm not going to post the grades or anything. Just assume that you've got full mark for that. Okay, everyone did a nice job on that, pretty much. Okay, so but positionality statements I will definitely look at a bit more closely, because we did spend quite a bit of time discussing it and then going through them. So I'm really eager to see how you put together your positionality statements. Okay, so just to mention that. Okay, so I guess there's no questions, so I guess we can. You're welcome, Masni. I guess we can turn it over to Mr. Siraju.
Prof, just wondering,
Oh yeah,
if
Shira.
we, yeah, if we will get any feedback for our positionality statement from you, Prof?
Yeah, I will definitely try to give you feedback on that.
All
Yeah.
right, thank you very
Sure.
much. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, Prof, it is actually Muhammad Fadili that is going to take a start.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Fudley. Okay, Fudley, you can share your screen, I think, and then we can get going.
Okay, hello, assalamualaikum, and very good evening to all of you. So, so you can see on the screen my
Yeah.
presentation.
Fudley, you want to you want to put on PowerPoint mode there? A slideshow
Yeah.
mode. Sorry, slideshow mode. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, is it okay? Okay.
Oh no, we're seeing your presenter's view. What do you call it? This one is called what? How do you? I don't know how you do that. Display settings. Never mind. You can.
You need to go to the three dots.
Oh, the three dots.
Yeah, three dots. You just
hide presenter
go to
view.
the.
Okay.
To hide presenter view there. You see? No.
Then you can go to the
three dot.
No, not here. Go back to slideshow.
This is space. You can choose the slideshow down there.
Yeah, go back to slideshow.
Okay, I choose already.
Yeah, go back there. That one.
Just
click on it. Oh, we're not seeing it.
You click the slideshow.
I click that.
Okay.
Okay, now the three dots. You see the three dots under the slide? The three dots?
Under the slide.
Just the circle with three dots?
Circle with three dots.
The one that you touched just now.
Yeah, okay.
Now, hide presenter view. Hide presenter view.
Okay, right.
Okay. Thank you, Masni.
Okay, thank you. So for today, I will present about naturalistic inquiry and the saturation concept research note by Glenn A. Bowen. So I will present with my colleague, Sirajo Muhammad. Okay, so we go through the abstract first. Okay, saturation is mentioned in qualitative research without any explanation of what it means and how it's occurred. It means there is no explanation. There's no explanation and there is no mean occurred when we said about the saturation. So this research not examine the saturation concept in naturalistic inquiry and the challenge it's present. Okay. In particular, it summarized the saturation process in a grounded theory study of community-based anti-poverty projects. Yeah. And then the main argument advanced in the research note is that claim of saturation should be supported by an explanation of how saturation was achieved and substantiated by clear evidence of its occurrence. So that is the abstract for this journal.
So yes, let me just comment a bit on that. So this is by Glenn Bowen, who, when he wrote this, I think he had just finished his PhD as well, and he wrote this article based on his experience doing his study. I think that's one of the reasons why I find it very useful for students, because he's speaking from his experience doing PhD. But not only that, but he makes a very good point at the outset that even though saturation is talked about a lot in the literature, there are very few examples, especially for like doctoral students, examples of how it's actually not necessarily achieved, but how it's reported and how it's I don't want to use the word proven. We never use the word proven in research, because nothing is ever really proven in research, but how it's substantiated or how it's illustrated. Okay, so it's not enough. Please take note of this, students. It's not enough just to say you've achieved saturation in your reporting. There has to be some evidence that you have reached saturation. And so he tries to address that need, because he makes the point that in the literature, you see that all the time. People talk about achieving saturation, but they never explain really how they did it or provide any evidence of it. So that's what he really tries to show here. And so I think he does a really good job of it. Okay, so that's why this paper is quite important. Okay, Mr. Fadli.
Okay, next. We go through introduction. Saturation often mentioned in qualitative research report, but do not explain what it means in the context of studies. The concept is described vaguely. Is it correct?
Yeah, vaguely, yeah.
Okay. And then the second is evidence of saturation must be given in the presentation of the data and discussed by the form in which it was recognized during the analysis, which from Kelly et al. 2003, page 13. Okay. And then they should provide clear description of the saturation process in their research report. Okay, purpose of these articles help qualitative researchers to understand the saturation concept and manage saturation process. Okay, there is a 4 process. Number 1 is discuss naturalistic inquiry and particular grounded theory methodology. Number 2, define the saturation and explain relevance to the two theory generation. Number 3 is demonstrate how saturation is operationalized. And number 4 is comment and recommend.
Okay,
so
can I
just?
Sorry, go ahead. So go ahead. Sorry.
So all of this is was issued in introduction by Bowen.
So what is meant by naturalistic inquiry? Who can answer? Who can answer that question? What is naturalistic inquiry? What is he referring to there? You should all know this by now.
Yes, Prof.
Yeah, Adnan.
It refers to the natural context, to the setting or the context of the inquiry. For example, we have the school is the context or the setting. So we have to do a natural inquiry about that context.
Okay. So it's characterized by the natural setting, right? Natural setting.
Yeah.
All right. So qualitative research studies phenomena in its natural setting, or in the natural setting of the phenomenon. So we don't do laboratory work, right? As qualitative researchers, we don't pull our study participants out of where they're experiencing the phenomenon, and we ask them to control the environment that they're in. No, we don't do that. We try to study people in the context of their everyday lives, okay, as those phenomena are unfolding in their lives. All right, so he does his study here. He refers to naturalistic inquiry because he's studying anti-poverty community development programs in Jamaica. Okay, so he spends, I don't know, he doesn't say how much time, but he spends a considerable amount of time there in the communities studying how these programs are implemented. Okay, so that's so it's important to understand.
So naturalistic inquiry, also known as alternative to traditional positivistic inquiry. Prof?
Right, exactly. Yeah, like it says there, because, well, why? I mean, why? How is it an alternative to traditional positivistic inquiry? When you think of positivistic inquiry, it's usually in conducted in what kind of context, in what kind of setting?
Okay. So, can I continue, Prof?
Yeah, but let me just hear from the class. Who wants to answer that question? How is naturalistic inquiry opposite to positivistic inquiry?
Yes, Prof. Naturalistic inquiry, as rightly said, is more concerned about the human and studying the human, studying phenomenon right at its natural setting. Unlike positivists who are more concerned about realism, like for example, carrying out laboratory work and other findings.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah. Okay. That's a good way of explaining it. So the traditional positivistic approach is to control the environment, to control the setting, so that we can focus on studying particular dimensions of a phenomenon, right? So it's based on that idea of control, controlling the setting, removing the context, removing the setting from the study, and so that you can focus on the variables or the constructs that you're interested in. Whereas naturalistic inquiry is just the opposite, right? It's instead of studying the mouse in the field, a positivist will study the mouse in the laboratory and control for all the environmental factors around it. Whereas the naturalistic inquirer will go into the field and study the mouse in its natural habitat. Okay, very simple example. Okay, and that's basically the difference. All right, anyway, let's continue.
Prof, can I ask one question?
Yeah, sure.
Prof, what about now, since we have many restrictions to travel to the states or to the next district, and we have to do interviews with the participants that we have selected, but we cannot do that in their naturalistic setting, for example,
Exactly.
because of the restrictions. Does it affect our research? Would there be any problem, or can we justify it later?
That's an excellent question, Jada, because it is definitely the reality now. And most researchers are just doing a lot of online types of interviews. Okay, but we have to realize that there is definitely limitations in doing that, because even if your study is based more or less solely on interviews, and of course we've talked about triangulation and stuff like that, the importance of that. So in most cases, they shouldn't be solely based on interviews. But even if they are, there's a difference between doing online interviews versus going to someone's workplace or their community and interviewing them there, right? It's still, even though it's just interview, it's still interviewing them in the place where they are living, engaging in their lives every day. There is an aspect, a quality to that definitely adds to the inquiry. Okay, so it's a form of field work. It really is. And so we're not able to experience that now because of the pandemic. So that's definitely a limitation. There's definitely a limitation there. All right. So you can still get a lot of good interview data using online methods, but it is definitely not the same. All right. And so you should definitely make note of that if you are doing your data collection in this particular time period of the pandemic, MCO and all that. That should definitely be mentioned in your methods as a limitation, as really a barrier that you have no control over at all. But definitely in your limitation of study, it should be mentioned. So it's a great question.
Thank you, Prof.
Yeah. Okay, Budley, sorry for slowing you down.
Okay, now we go through naturalistic inquiry. Naturalistic inquiry, this is from Lincoln and Guba. Naturalistic inquiry is characterized by research in natural settings rather than in laboratories. Qualitative methods, purposing, sampling, inductive analysis, a grounded theory approach, a case study reporting mode, the tentative application of findings, and special criteria of trustworthiness. So, and then naturalistic inquiry requires robust data collection, techniques, and the documentation of research procedures.
Go ahead. So yeah, you can continue. We just discussed this. So.
Okay. So now we go through grounded theory. In naturalistic inquiry, grounded theory is a general methodology for developing theory that is grounded in data systematically gathered and analyzed. The objective of the methodology is to construct a theory that reflects an understanding of phenomena. The grounded theory approach should include the constant comparative method linked with theoretical sampling and special coding procedures by Glaser and Strauss, 1967.
So yeah, as I mentioned, his work is based on grounded theory, and so it's very much he goes into it quite in depth in terms of his method. But we can still apply many of his lessons here in this article. We can apply to our other traditions. So, okay, go ahead.
Okay, next is constant comparative methods. Constant comparison is a central feature of grounded theory procedures, theoretical saturation, defining characteristic of grounded theory. 4 stages in constant comparative methods by Glaser and Strauss. Number 1 is comparing incident applicable to each theme that emerged from the data. Number 2, integrating themes and their properties. Number 3 is delimiting the theory. Number 4, writing the theory, sampling, data collection, and analysis process concurrently. Data analysis involves systematic coding procedures, newly gathered data or continually compared with previously collected data and their coding. The process includes negative cases of falsifying evidence that refute the emerging theory.
So here he talks about the central feature of grounded theory, which is the constant comparative method. Okay, it's how theory is really born out of the method itself. Okay, and this idea of constant comparative. So you're going to come across this a lot in your reading on all qualitative research. It's not just grounded theory that uses constant comparative, although it came out of, again, like saturation, it came out of the tradition of grounded theory, but then many other qualitative traditions have adopted it. And it's the idea that as you're analyzing your data in qualitative research, you're constantly comparing lots of things. And here they break it down. And this is from the original book on grounded theory, Glaser and Strauss, 1967. But so we're constantly comparing emerging new data that comes in with the previous data. Okay, constantly comparing data with our previous existing codes or themes that we have. Okay, and then from there, delimiting the theory, which means trying to put forward the theory from the analysis, from the coding, categorizing, thematizing, and then from there sort of indicating what the theory is and then writing up the theory. So they break it out into these 4 steps, but the actual work is really in the first 2. The actual ongoing analysis work is really in the first 2, where we're constantly comparing whatever new data we get with the existing analysis that we've done within our categories, comparing different excerpts of data, okay, to compare to see how they fit within a particular category, right? Comparing codes to see whether and how they fit under the different categories. So it's constantly, it's exactly as the name says, it's a constant process of comparison. Okay, and from there, it's that sort of grunt work where the theory sort of emerges. Okay, so it's something that we need to be aware of, because it's going to be, you're going to read about it a lot as you go through the literature. Okay. Okay, let's keep going.
Okay, now we go through saturation. Data saturation entails bringing new participants continually into the study until the data set is complete, as indicated by data replication of redundancy. Saturation is reached when the researcher gathers data to the point of diminishing returns, when nothing new is being added. Saturating data ensures replication in categories. Replication verifies and ensures comprehension and completeness. Theoretical saturation, it means the data categories are well established and validated. Saturation of all categories signifies the point of which to end the research.
Okay, so here he introduces the idea, the concept of saturation, okay, and what it means. And so to acclaim to have come up with a theory, there needs to be a rigorous process to ensure that those concepts that comprise the theory are really reflected in the data itself. And so to do that, you have to really go through this process, constant comparative method leading to what they call theoretical saturation in grounded theory. Okay, so last week we showed the code book, remember? And we had all those, we had the name of the category, and then we had the definition, right? And then we had the codes underneath each category. Okay, so those categories emerge from your coding. Okay, so you go out, you start your coding, right? And from your coding, you develop, when you start to combine your codes, you develop larger categorical names for those codes called categories, essentially. Okay, now it's those categories where saturation is really achieved. Okay, and because under those categories you have the codes, and the codes are the first form of analysis that reflects the data. So as you're going through and you're doing your analysis, you're coding your data. Once you have developed categories from those codes, and you find that as you're going through the transcripts, there's no new codes under a certain category, that's when theoretical saturation is achieved, okay? It's not just a matter of, well, we're not, like a lot of people, they refer to saturation as no new data coming in. Okay, well, what does that mean? No new data coming in, nothing new coming into the finding. Okay, well, what does that mean? Okay, they say that, but they don't really explain how it actually works. What's nice about grounded theory is that they have a method, this method of theoretical saturation that actually is very systematic. It's very systematic, and that's the use of the code book, like we showed last week, introduced last week, and we'll continue with this week. Okay, so the grounded theory method of achieving saturation is nice because it's more systematic in that way. Okay, and so that's why code books are very useful, because code books really come out of the grounded theory tradition. All right, but it's a very structured way of looking at it and of showing that you've achieved saturation. Okay. So if there's any questions at any time, please stop and feel free to ask. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Fadli. Can you continue?
Okay. So next is theoretical sampling. Theoretical saturation is a consequence of the theoretical sampling. Sampling on it means sampling on the basis of concepts that have proven theoretical relevance to the evolving theory. Focuses less on sample size and more on sampling adequacy. An appropriate sample is composed of participants who best represent or have knowledge of research topic.
Okay, so theoretical sampling is also part of the grounded theory method. Okay, we're not going to get into it that much, but what's important here is the yellow highlight, as Mr. Fadli has very nicely highlighted the most important bullet on the screen in yellow. Very nice. Okay. And yeah, that's it. I mean, qualitative research is, and this is not just for grounded theory, but this is for all grounded qualitative research. Okay. The focus should be less on sample size and more on sampling adequacy. Okay. And so how do we ensure sampling adequacy? All right. What is meant by sampling adequacy? All right. Who can answer that question? Anyone? What is meant by sampling adequacy? We always get the question of sampling size, but how often do people ask us whether our sample was adequate?
Yes, Prof.
Yeah. And then?
Adequate means that you are, seeking the participants till you reach the saturation. There is no redundant or redundant, what we call that, responses from the participants. So adequacy here is, what we call that is very essential. Another thing that you have to select the targeted participants that are going to answer your questions rather than the number of participants who are there.
Yep. Very nicely put. Yeah. And so it's not so much about, of course, it's not about sample size, but it's not even only about, first of all, are you getting the right, are you asking, like Adnan just said, are you getting the right participants? Are you asking the right people? Okay, that's really important part of, and that's very important in grounded theory, especially because, you need people that can speak directly to the issue you're studying. In other words, how are you supposed to develop your theory that way? You can't really develop if these people can't really speak to the issue at hand. Theoretical sampling is as theoretical issues emerge from the findings. That's how you know to choose your next sample. In other words, in grounded theory studies, they don't say at the outset we're going to interview 13 teachers, for example, for this grounded theory study. What they'll usually do is they'll start with teachers, but then what they'll do is, if they're doing a grounded theory study on something related to schools or teaching and learning, they may find that, well, from their emerging theory, from the emerging analysis, they found that, one of the important answers that they need cannot come from teachers. It has to come from students. So even though they started with teachers, based on the findings that they're getting, then they might switch to students. Okay. In other words, they sample according to how the findings and how the theory emerges, right? And so it's really a qualitative decision. It's based on the quality of data you need. It's based on the type of data you need rather than sample size, okay? And that's really how grounded theory looks at sampling. And that's true. I mean, that should be true. Well, not necessarily. Okay, so for example, if you're doing a phenomenological study where you're really studying the experiences of one particular group, obviously you're not going to do theoretical sampling, but you're still going to look at sampling adequacy in terms of, have I really saturated this particular participant? In other words, have I gotten all the data out of this person that I need to get? And that's why, like in phenomenological studies, you'll often see they interview them 2, 3, maybe even 4 times, because they really want to make sure that they're getting data redundancy, right? In other words, it's like they've squeezed everything out of their respondent that they can. There's nothing left. We've gotten everything we can out of this person, and they've given us all the data that we can get related to the study. Okay. So it's really important that as you guys, as qualitative researchers, you start thinking in these terms. You've got to really sort of put this idea of sample size out of your minds. That is not the main concern. Of course, it is a concern, but it's not the main concern. What should be of concern to you more is whether you are sampling the right people. If you're saturating if your findings are saturated, your results are saturated, are you really getting as much data as you can out of your respondents? Have you asked them all the possible questions you can in relation to your topic, what you need to know? All right. So those are the kind of questions you should be asking. Is anything missing? Have you missed anything? And so forth. Okay. So sampling adequacy is the way that we look at sampling in qualitative research. All right. We don't focus so much on sample size.
Prof.
All right. Yeah. Maizura.
Maizura here, Prof.
Yeah.
Just now you were saying about the sample adequacy. Basically, you need to achieve the sample size is basically need to achieve a point of saturation. How do we prove that actually the sample already achieved the point of saturation in our report? Is it through answering problem statement or research question, Prof?
Well, Mysore, that's what this article is really about. So I think the idea is let's go through the whole article, and then maybe your question will be answered. That's really the point of the whole article, is how do we show, how do we prove, and how do we show and illustrate saturation? Okay, so he's just beginning now to talk about it. So maybe we should just let Mr. Fadli continue and stop interrupting, and then maybe we'll get an answer to your question. And I'm the one interrupting. No, I'm the one interrupting, so I apologize. Anyway, go ahead, Fadli, continue.
Okay, next, and still on the theoretical sampling, depth of information will indicate sampling adequacy. Sampling adequacy, sufficient data to account for all aspects of the phenomenon have been obtained. Team saturation, no new data are added because that category has been adequately explained.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so please think sampling adequacy. Has the data sufficiently accounted for all aspects of the phenomenon? Okay, our qualitative students, we have to really go back to this idea of in-depth research. We are losing. We're losing out to the quantitative people. We really are. A lot of our qualitative studies now are so watered down because we're thinking sample size and not sampling adequacy. That's really the main issue, I think. Anyway, there's other issues as well, but okay, go ahead, Fadli.
Okay, next is formal theory. Regarding Glaser and Strauss, formal theory is developed for a formal or conceptual area of inquiry. Use of sensitizing concept, which serve as a point of reference and guide for theory development.
Yeah, this has to do.
All about
yeah, this has more to do with the grounded theory approach and less on saturation. So I'm just going to we're going to just glaze over this. Anyway, yeah, grounded theory, they don't do in-depth literature review prior to the study. They don't come up with really comprehensive conceptual frameworks prior to the study, but they do identify core concepts that they want to use to sort of frame their inquiry. And so that's what they're talking about here, is the sensitizing concepts, which is it's not the same as a conceptual framework. It's just some main concepts from the literature review that you can use to begin your inquiry, basically. And so that's what he's talking about. So that's not that important to the issue of, not so much, it's not so relevant to the issue of saturation. So go ahead. Continue.
Okay, now we go to stakeholder collaboration theory. Before embark on the fieldwork, researchers create conceptual framework upon sensitizing concepts. Researchers took particular care to let new concepts surface from the data and to avoid imposing extent concept that reflected his own epistemological predilection. The researcher used in-depth interviews, non-participant observation, and documents review to collect data. It's because the emphasis was on quality rather than quantity. The objective was not to maximize numbers, but rather to become saturated with information on the topic regarding PJ in 1988.
Yeah. So you can see there, grounded theory, they rely on a variety of different techniques for collecting data. So it's not just interviews, it's usually a combination of interview, observation, etc. Okay, so that's what he did as well. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, to continue with the stakeholder collaboration theory. The research revealed that the approach to poverty reduction in social funds supported communities is a process of development, focused collaboration among various stakeholders. There is 4 stages. You can refer figure 1, page 143 in the journal. Number 1 is identifying problems and priorities. Number 2 is motivating and mobilizing. Number 3 is working together. And number 4 is creating an enabling environment.
So this is his theory. Yeah. Sorry, Fadli, I cut you off again. This is basically his theory. This is what his findings were. This is the 4 stages of his theory. Okay, in terms of how people collaborate in these poverty reduction programs, how communities collaborate. So, and he referred to it as 4 stages. All right. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the figure for the themes and code for stakeholders and collaboration theory.
Okay, so this is the first Oh, can you go back to that? Sorry, Fadli, can you go back to that diagram? Yeah, so this is good. So this is very helpful. If you can include something like this in your thesis as well. This is the first sort of illustration he gives in a sort of table form that shows how his themes and his codes from the theory fit together. Okay, so now he talks about theme and code, right? That could be theme and category. Okay, again, this is where jargon and qualitative research gets confusing, right? So, but anyway, these are his 4 main, because he calls these thematic categories. He doesn't call them themes, he calls them thematic categories in the text. So he had thematic categories or theme and then code. So basically these are the 4 thematic categories that comprise his theory. And then these are the code, the major codes underneath each of these themes. Okay. And so this is the first way of illustrating saturation, is to show how everything fits together. Okay. Now, of course, this is not all of it. This is just the first one, right? To show the major themes of the theory. And then, as you can see, the grounded theory also has on the side there these conditions, strategies, interactions, consequences. That's part of grounded theory as well, to show that the sort of process, that's a process model. Okay. And that's also part of it. Okay. So go ahead, Fadli. Sorry.
Okay. Okay, wait. So each stages was thematic theory to present results together constitute the main findings, such as the process of collaboration that derive from specific codes. Stage 1 reflects community conditions. Stage 2 prompting strategies of the collaboration process. Stage 3 consists of forms of interactions, and stage 4 consequence of social fund projects in beneficiary communities. And lastly, the underlying stakeholder involvement theory can increase productivity and create conditions for community to driven development.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, that's all about stakeholder collaborative
collaboration theory.
Collaboration theory.
Yeah. Yep. So it's a theory that explains community-driven development and how the different stakeholders collaborate to make it happen, basically, right? And so he looked at, I think 10, I can't remember, it was 10 or 12 different communities. So he developed this theory. This is a finding that comprises 10 to 12 different community projects, right? And so and I think he mentioned he had over 30 respondents for his interviews. And so you can see that's quite common in grounded theory, 20, 30, even more, sometimes 40 participants in terms of interviews for the study. It's a bit more rigorous than a lot of other qualitative approaches, just because to claim that you've developed a theory requires quite a bit of data. And data saturation has to be really shown very clearly. Theoretical saturation. Okay.
There is 26 respondents.
36, is that right, Budley?
26.
26, but then he had 10. He also used 10. He had 10 key informants. Yeah.
10 key informants.
Right. And then he had documents and he had observations and a whole bunch of stuff.
Okay.
Okay. Next.
Okay, that's all from me.
Okay.
So I will give present to Siraju.
Okay, thank you, Fadli.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr.
Yes. Can I proceed, Prof?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
Suraju.
Let me share the test. Can you see my?
Yeah, we can see it. You just have to go to slideshow mode.
Yeah.
Yes. Is it okay now?
It looks great.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. It's actually continuation from where my colleague stopped. Talking about naturalistic inquiry and saturation concepts, the research notes. Before I proceed, uh, I have some questions thinking for before the class. Questions. Number one question is, those questions are actually rooted from the article. Number one question: does triangulation of data contribute to the premature saturation? Then question number two: how does the court terms transform into established theory? Then question number three: what are the strategies that contribute to the credible findings? So those are the questions for the class.
They're very good
May I
questions. Very good questions, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the outline, the contents includes identification of terms, coding, number three, evidence of saturation, number four, trustworthiness, number five, challenges, and then last but not the least, conclusion. So I will start with the stakeholder collaborative theory as already identified, as already presented by my colleague. So I just want to make it more elaborate in such a way that, yes, we understand that the theory was formed out of the terms and about 3 terms, and each one of the 10 as presented by my colleague is formed from the code. Code 1, voicing common concern. Code 2, understanding the system. Code 3, settling on a project. Those 3 codes collectively combined together make up our term 1, that is identifying the problems and priorities. Then next.
Okay, sorry, can I stop you there, Sergio? I want to ask the class a question. So in terms of saturation, why is something like this, like the figure one on in the article, and then like this slide here, you see this is the presentation of the theme and the 3 core codes under this thematic category. Why is this important for displaying saturation? How does this act as evidence of saturation? Can anybody tell me? Now, of course, if you present this in your report, like he did, you also have to, of course, narrate it. You narrate it. You have to explain it as well. It's not just you just show this and that's it. So there's a narrative that goes with this, where the researcher explains how each code relates to the theme. Okay, but how is this helpful to sort of prove saturation? How does it work as a tool for displaying saturation? Anyone want to answer the question?
Professor, when further coding is not needed, when can you hear me?
Yeah. I didn't understand what you said though.
I want to say that when further coding is not needed, I think coding is full.
You mean based on the 3 codes that are presented here?
Yeah.
It shows that further coding is not needed.
Yeah.
Okay. How would you know that without looking at the data though?
And I like to say that when we use after data collection, when you analyze data, we use some coding. And I think saturation needs for fulfill gap. And I like to say your question. The answer is when I will see the further coding not need. I like to say it.
Okay. Well, I don't. It's hard to really determine whether further coding is needed without. I mean, unless you can actually look at the data, it's hard to really make that judgment. But I think it's important is that what's important here is that it shows there's a strong alignment between the theme and those three sub codes, whatever you want to call them. He calls them codes. That there's alignment with them, between them. In other words, when he talks about identifying problems and priorities, you can see that with those three codes, they are clearly reflecting identifying problems and priorities. Okay. Now, again, you have to read the researcher's narration of these findings. I know, explaining how those three things relate to identifying problems and priorities. But this does help to sort of establish saturation. If, for example, any of these three codes do not clearly reflect something in the nature of identifying problems and priorities, then we can clearly see that perhaps saturation has not been achieved, or there's some issues with the analysis itself, the credibility of the analysis. Okay. So displaying this as a first step, it's not the only step, of course, but displaying this as a first sort of piece of evidence, if you will, is really helpful. Of course, this is also the main finding. So of course you'd have to present this anyway. Okay. But there are a lot of theses, especially where they don't present it together. They don't present the findings sort of together in one table like this. So it's really hard to see the student's overall finding for the study. In this case, it's a theory, so it really has to fit together. But it's really important to illustrate it this way, to see, this allows the reader to really make a judgment as to whether there is alignment and there's consistency between the codes and the theme. Okay, so that's the first, actually that's the very first step in looking at whether there's a sort of evidence of saturation, is that alignment. Okay, so let's Raju, I don't think you need to spend so much time talking about the findings. I think we can move on past the findings, because this paper is really about saturation. So I think it's important we get to that. Okay?
Okay. So I should move on from the next slide.
Yeah, the theory, you can move on. I think we've sort of...
Okay, yeah. So can I continue with the okay?
Yeah, why don't you can skip the findings and go to the next issue related to saturation. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. Then the coding process.
Yeah.
Yeah. The author used the constant comparative method for reviewing lines, sentences, paragraphs, segments, and transcribed interviews, and failed not to decide which code fit the concept suggested by the data. So, as mentioned earlier, constant comparative analysis or constant comparative method is one of the features of the grounded theory study. So the author applies this particular strategy. Then coding was performed at 3 levels: open, axial, and selective. Line by line coding was performed to identify the most recent statement by the author, thereby identifying a tangible data or 10. Next, the author analyzed the selective codes to identify terms that cut across the data and further distill them to create a core category of imaging terms. The author has also noted that whereas codes are applied to the data, terms emerge from the data. Next slide.
Okay, okay. So in explaining how he coded his data, okay, he explains very meticulously how he coded his data. And this is another thing that's often missed by students in the way in their chapter 3, when they talk about their data analysis. Often the data analysis section is very brief. It's like they don't explain, they don't describe and explain how they actually went about doing the analysis. What did you do when you did coding? Explain it, describe it. So here he's giving an example of how you describe coding, how you describe the three, in grounded theory, the 3 phases of coding: open, axial, and selective coding. He explains it and describes it very clearly. And then he also gives tables to illustrate how he did it. Okay, so he's giving us an example of how you describe your conduct of your analysis, of conducting your analysis. Okay, like we say, oh, we coded the data. We went through and we gave, we coded the data, we did open coding, and then we categorized the data, and then that's all they write. They don't explain how they actually did it. What did you look for? How did you develop your codes? What did you use as codes? How much text did you code? What did you code? All those questions he really goes into detail here about. And so this is a really good example. So you can go back and look at this when you're going to go and write up your analysis section to really to show how you illustrate it, how you demonstrate it. Okay. So Raju, do you have table 1 in the article? Do you have that in your slides by any chance?
Actually, I didn't draw the table 1.
Okay, I just wanted to show that to the class, but it's okay. Go ahead, continue. I'll show it after this next.
Okay. Next heading: evidence of saturation. Bowen used memo to record ideas, thereby having refined and distilled areas of commonality and divergence. Yes, use of memo is very important, as identified by the author, that it helps to refine and distill the areas of common, those areas that appears more. So it was an understood fact that single isolated incidents will not be relevant to the theory construction. Rather, use of constant comparative or constant comparison. It was clear that theoretical saturation can only be achieved when additional data and further analysis failed to uncover any new thematic idea in relation to the emerging theory. Next slide. Having talked about evidence of saturation, we are now moving to trustworthiness. In order to promote the transferability and confidence of the readers, the author applied the principles of credibility, such as triangulation, audit trail, member checking, and peer review. Challenges. The challenges, as indicated by the author, the inherent challenges include tight schedules. Of course, because it was said that the inquiry, the naturalistic inquiry involve going to the humans at it, or study the human phenomenon at its natural setting. So definitely it will be out of tight schedules. The limited budget for the research, of course, it involves a lot of capital. It is capital extensive. Then prolonged engagement in the field, which of course may make one to be tired, then tedious and boring. So the challenges, as identified by the author, are more about taking long period of time, and one have to go to the setting, the natural setting, to study the phenomenon. And one have to apply all the principles to make the findings more credible. Then conclusion. Naturalistic inquiry is concerned about interpretation of human phenomenon at its natural setting. Level of data saturation can only be acceptable if it is followed by a detailed explanation. Author demonstrated how a difficult issue in qualitative research can be addressed. Last but not the least, the author concluded that researchers should illustrate procedures and criteria used to achieve data or theoretical saturation in their studies. And that's the end.
So Raju, you left out a lot of content on the evidence of saturation part, which is what the main point of the article. Why did you leave out so much? And then on the section on evidence of saturation, on coding, and then of trustworthiness, those are the parts of the article where he really talks about how he displays and describes how he achieves saturation. You left out quite a bit. Why'd you leave out so much content?
Yeah, I wanted to summarize. I wanted to summarize the whole points so as to make it more comprehensible. Because yes, of course, I made it in a brief so as to summarize. However, I can still screen share the article, the whole article, so as so for all of us to see the.
It's okay. Let me do it because there's some points. There's some things I want to show from the article to the class. So I'll stop your sharing now, and I'll just move to mine.
Okay.
Okay. So I just want to go back and look at some of the things that were missed in the presentation just now. So in the section on coding, all right. So Bowen, what he does here is he goes into quite extensive detail on how he did his open, axial, and substantive coding for his grounded theory. Okay, so it's not necessarily the case in your studies because I'm sure not all of you are doing grounded theory, but it's a good it's a good example of how you describe the analysis process. Okay, so let me just show. So can you all see the article up on the screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So in the section on coding, if you go to page 144, after that first table where he shows his theory, the results of the study, the theory itself, he shows this table as well. Okay. Table 1. Now, this is an example. Again, these are just examples. It's an illustration. All right. That shows how he conducted his line by line open coding. Okay. So if you say you're doing open coding, well, show me how you did it. Okay. And so he does. He not only explains it and describes it, but he also gives these illustrations. Okay, so table 1 is a very nice, concise table. It's just an example. He gives a statement, interview statement. This is the data, essentially. Okay, and then he shows how, from this statement, he did his line-by-line coding. Okay, and you can see there, this is a very nice, clear illustration that this is literally line by line. Okay. So for each line of this data, each sentence actually, he attributes a code to it, right? And in his write-up, he talks about how he did take some of his codes from his interview guide. So he used the interview guide and the questions in the interview guide as a sort of guide for his coding, okay? Which is a very interesting approach. In fact, I don't come across that too often in the literature, okay? But maybe that is common in grounded theory studies. I'm not sure. Okay, so that's the first table in illustrating that he shows in illustrating coding. All right, so don't use that as an excuse in your own research, in your own studies. You can do the same. Okay, you can give examples like this. So when you talk about how you conducted your coding, you can actually illustrate it through these examples like this. All right. Other examples would be like the ones I showed you last week in the class. Remember I showed you those examples of coding? So there was one that was handwritten, right? There's another one that was it's quite long, it was a whole page. Okay, you can include those in your appendix in your thesis to show how you actually conducted your coding, all right? And that's really helpful for the reader, for the evaluator, to see how you actually carried it out. Okay, so when you accompany that with the description, the text, it makes it very convincing. And this is how you show or prove saturation. So he talks about here coding, the number of codes, like you see here, 56 codes. He actually mentions the number of codes. So After first level of coding, he came up with 56 codes. All right, so that's quite common in the methods to explain as each phase of the coding process. You actually mentioned the number of codes. That also shows saturation to some degree. All right. Okay. And then again, this is really important text for you to go back and read. Okay. He talks about exactly how he did it. All right. He talks about how he conducted constant comparative. All right. This is very nice writing, actually. He says, in a back and forth interplay with the data, I constantly checked and rechecked the elemental codes and concepts. The analysis was based on an inductive approach geared to identify patterns and discovering theoretical properties in the data. I scrutinized and compared data and with codes in order to organize ideas and pinpoint concepts that seem to cluster together. Okay, so he's really just he's describing what he did, basically. That's all he's doing. Okay. Codes were clustered into substantive categories, and these category codes were compared across different interview transcripts, observational data, respondent feedback, and data from documents. Okay. So basically, as he developed his code book, he would take that code book and then he would apply it to the different types of data that he was collecting, all right, to further his analysis and to further develop his theory. Okay. He talks about the questions he asked, right? So I compared coded segments by asking, how is this text similar to or different from preceding text? Okay, that's part of constant comparative. When you come across new text to code, right, and you want to compare it to other text under the same code, you're going to ask yourself, how does this text compare to the other text I've already coded, right? There should be a very strong similarity because it's under the same code, right? And so that's part of constant comparative. What kinds of ideas are mentioned in both interview statements and documents, all right? So is there consistency between the interviews and the documents, right? If they're both mentioned under the same code, there should be similarities, right? Because you don't code documents and interviews under different codes. It's the same analysis, right? That's what triangulation is all about, is that you're getting the same finding from different sources of data, okay? And so that's what he's talking about here. If new categories were suggested by the new data, then the previous transcripts of interviews, together with the data from observation documents, were reanalyzed to determine the presence of those categories. By doing so, I filled in underdeveloped categories and narrowed excess ones. So as you're going, say in interview 4, you come up with a new category, right, by merging some codes together. Now, because it's a new category in interview 4, you need to then go back to interviews 1, 2, and 3 to analyze for the presence of that category as well. Okay, so that's really important to know. And this is true in all qualitative research, is that, say if you're in interview 10, right, and a new category emerges from the data, right, you have to then go back and see whether that category is present in the previous interviews as well, okay? And so it sounds tedious. It sounds a bit tedious, but that is the process. This is really the constant comparative method. Okay, this is really he's really taking us through, walking us through the constant comparative method. So it's really well done. Okay, and then talk about axial coding briefly, and then selective coding. This is grounded theory. We're not gonna get into this, but he does explain how he did it. Okay, that's the important thing. And so once in grounded theory, once you get into axial coding and selective coding, that's what we call second level analysis. Okay, so second level coding and analysis is where you begin to look at the bigger themes and the interconnection between the themes. And this is how grounded theorists, this is where they really begin to develop their theory. Okay, so once they've saturated their categories, then how do those categories sort of fit together and explain the phenomenon? And that's what he's referring to here. Okay, now more evidence of saturation. He talks about memos. Okay, and memos helped him refine and keep track of his ideas that developed as he was doing this comparison, constant comparison. Okay, so you're doing all this constant comparison, right? You're going back and you're comparing data to data, data to codes. Where do you keep track of all these findings, all these new emerging, things? Well, that's where memoing comes in, right? You write memos, okay? And he talks about how he wrote memos at different levels, starts with second level coding, axial coding, explaining theoretical relationships through his memos, all right? And he sort of takes us through that. He mentions about looking for patterns in the data. Now, what happens when you come across single isolated incidents, right? And he says that that's not important in terms of theory construction, because theory construction is not built on a single incident. It's built on multiple incidents, right? So a category is comprised of codes, which is comprised of multiple incidents of that particular thing. So, you know, what he's saying is that single incidents, he didn't really pay much attention to them. Okay, so what I want to show here is this another nice table he has. All right. Now, this is a really good table for illustrating saturation. Okay. Let's see if I can fit it in the screen. Just the size. Okay. I hope that's not too small. Maybe I'll blow it up a little bit. We'll look at it part by part. Okay. So here what he does is now he sort of fleshes out his categories. So that first table, he showed just the category, the thematic category and the codes, right? Now he fleshes it out even further. All right. And this is another way, it's actually another form of a code book to some degree. What he does here is very nice. He has his thematic category again, right? He has the 3 sub-themes. Okay. Now above he called them codes, and now he's calling them sub-themes. Again, this is where the jargon, the use of language gets confusing. Okay. Before he was calling them codes, now he's calling them sub-themes. All right. So you have the thematic category. These are the main themes, right? And, oh, sorry, this is the main theme here, working together. And then the sub-themes, okay? And these were what he called codes before. Now he's showing underneath these sub-themes are all these open codes, okay? Now, I would prefer to call this theme category codes, okay? It's an easier way for me to understand it, okay? And if you do that, you can see very clearly, okay? You have the main themes, each of these 3 categories, and then the particular codes. So here's where you can really see saturation, because you can see whether these open codes are reflected by this category or this sub-theme, which is then reflected by the theme, okay? So working together, matching resources to requirements. Now, again, we don't know just by looking at the table what that really means. He defines it in the text. Okay. Open codes: money, materials, supplies, provisions, sweat equity, donations, contributions, resources. Okay, these are all the codes underneath this category. And then he gives data here, an example of data of reflecting in one of these codes. Okay. Specifically reflecting this category here, matching resources to requirements. Our association tried to pull whatever resources we had available to us. We asked the business people to support us, and we decided to put in as much work as necessary so we could have the project. Okay, so here is where we can see alignment between the data, the codes, the categories, and the theme. Okay, it's all in one table. Okay, so if you can do this, it's very, very useful. And then, of course, you have to explain it again in the text. You have to walk the reader through it. Okay, but by doing that, we can definitely see your thinking as the analyst, how you thought about your findings. Sorry, I'm going to erase all my little marks here. Okay, the next one is getting the job done. So tasks, labor, manpower, social fund guidelines, business support, project organization. Okay, now here he adds in something else. He adds in additional data. All right. So getting the job done meant that people contributed to it, right? So here, local sponsor contributed $650,000 to the home project. All right. Here's data. Here's codes. Here's category. Okay. And here's another one with even more data. Whoops. So showing tangible results is the category or the sub-theme. Okay. And then we have here the codes, comments, or data. All right. Evidence of tangible results. Okay, so if showing tangible results is the category, here is some evidence of tangible results. Okay, so this is additional data. And then also data from documents, right? So multiple, so we see the triangulation here. I'll draw a triangle. Cool. Okay. So here we see further evidence of saturation through triangulation of findings. Okay, so we have different types of data triangulating on the finding. Okay, so this is another way of illustrating saturation, triangulation. Okay, and that also contributes to the trustworthiness of the findings. Okay, by illustrating it this way, it contributes to the trustworthiness of the finding by showing the triangulation. Okay, does everybody see that? Can you see the way that he did that here? So if you can do a table like this, very, very useful. Okay, it makes a very strong case for saturation. Okay, again, along with the text explaining it, not just the table. All right. Here he also gives additional examples of this one category working together. Okay, and he mentions the 3 forms of interactions. Right, so he's explaining it, and then he presents additional data. In addition to the evidence presented in the table, respondents commented specifically about working together. Okay, and now this is very important. The quotes that he chooses to support this finding of working together. Okay, look at the quotes he chooses. They are crystal clear in support of the theme or the category working together. Working together with people from different sectors of the society builds community relationships, cooperation, and unity. People need to work together to make the community a better place. Working together, we can achieve our goals, blah, 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 blah. What is our main strength? We work together as one. Okay, very clear. This is in vivo coding, and this is the power of in vivo coding. Remember we talked about in vivo coding last week? Do you remember that in vivo coding? All right, so here, by using in vivo coding, by choosing data that was selected using in vivo coding, he picks 3 small quotes here that really show support for his finding. All right. And so this is another element of displaying saturation, is the quotes that you choose, the data that you choose to highlight and to substantiate your finding in your report. Okay, so this is another element of saturation, of displaying saturation. So if you choose quotes that don't really reflect the finding, the theme that you're presenting, it of course it relates to the trustworthiness of the finding. It makes the findings less trustworthy, less credible. Okay, and that of course makes your claims of saturation, puts them in question. All right. So it's another way he shows here how he did it. Okay, so that's those are the different illustrations he gives, and then his description. Okay, so that's a really important section. So I really highly, highly recommend all of you to go back and read this article, especially that section on establishing saturation. Okay, and then it's also, as we've just touched on, it's also related to trustworthiness. So things like triangulation. He talks about how he used triangulation here, member checking. He talks about negative case analysis. All right, where you're actually you're seeking cases that don't fit in the finding to see whether you've really covered it. Are there any examples where someone said something that goes against the finding that you've come up with? That's the negative case analysis, where you're really sort of challenging your own analysis. You're challenging your own findings. Okay, that's the negative case analysis.
Assalamualaikum, Prof.
Yes.
Nathan here. Prof, I would like to ask, often in Viva, right, the panel will ask you, what makes you say that you reach your data saturations?
Yeah, exactly.
So usually we will mention that we have reached our data saturations. Do we need to prepare like a table, like a table just now, table 2,
yeah,
which is prepared by Bowen now? I mean, that is whenever that they ask, we can probably present that to them to show that this is how we organize our data, and this is how we find that our data is really saturated?
Yeah, good question, Hanizan. And it's a very good question because it's a very practical question. And it is a question that will always come up in Viva with a qualitative study. So like Bowen does here, your answer should be, well, there was no one particular way of showing saturation, okay? You used multiple strategies to confirm or to achieve saturation. And yes, you can point to those. You can point to those particular tables. They should be in your thesis, those tables, right? So you can point to those tables, and of course also explain the process. You can talk about triangulation. You can talk about how you conducted your coding. You can talk about those tables and the content in those tables, right? So you can talk about the alignment and the consistency between your codes and your themes. You can show the examples of how you coded your data, how you analyze your data. You can show all those examples. There is no one way of proving saturation. That's his point here. Bowen's point here is that you need multiple, multiple strategies or multiple, I don't know what you call it, tools to really show that you've reached saturation. So that's a very difficult question to answer in Viva, because there is no one simple answer to it. So that's why you need to be prepared. You need to be prepared by including these things in the thesis and then making use of them during the Viva. Well, in reference to that, Hanizan, one of the things I suggest to all of you is that for your Viva, and I don't know why students nowadays, again, I don't know what's going on with students, but in Viva, when they're asked questions like that, nowadays, very rarely students will say, thank you, that's a very good question, Prof, or whatever. If you look on pages, on pages 149, 156, and 158, I've given examples of how I have, achieved saturation. Students don't seem to know their work very well nowadays. Like they very rarely refer to the actual thesis and say, on page 146, I sort of lay out exactly how I did it. If you go back and look at it, it's like, it's very strange. It's like they've lacked confidence in their own work or in their ability to really defend their work. I don't know what it is, but that is really an effective way of doing it. If you can show with confidence, in Appendix A and B and C, I have, tables that, illustrate how I've conducted my analysis. As you can see in those tables, blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? Like you really have command of your work, of your thesis. So it's not only including these things. Yes, you should include these things, but it's also how you answer the question in Viva. Okay. There's no simple answer to that question. You have to use multiple pieces of evidence, multiple sources of evidence to show saturation. All right. So that would be my response to that question.
Sure. Thank you so much.
I hope that was helpful. Okay. So, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just like to ask, because in the past I was some different school of thought. I came across some different school of thought where they said that for you to prove saturation, you may actually need to display how all the themes that you have got are mapped out across all your participants. This to show that, that after a certain number of participants, you really didn't get any more new themes. I don't know whether that is something that is common practice or I guess that was from somebody.
Well, that's what saturation means, and that's why he talks a great deal about theoretical saturation. Of course, he's talking about in the context of grounded theory. So how it's done in grounded theory is through theoretical saturation, which is saturation of the conceptual categories. Okay, so you need to. It needs to be narrated. It needs to be explained. It needs to be explained.
What I mean is that, for example, if let's say that we have to construct a table to show that, okay, I have got theme A, B, and C, and this theme A, B, and C are reported by participants 1, 2, 3, 5, or whatever, displayed in the table. Is that necessary?
That's a very superficial way of showing saturation. Actually, it's a very superficial way, because I mean, a theme. First of all, a theme is a major theoretical category. So by right, a theme should encompass a large percentage of your data anyway. So if the theme does not is not captured, I mean, you have a real problem with your analysis. So, I mean, you can do that, but to me, it's a very superficial way of showing saturation. But you're right. I have heard that comment by mostly quantitative examiners. A lot of quantitative examiners, at least in my experience, have made that kind of comment. It's like they need to see something, but that to me shows that the student really didn't do a good job of explaining how they achieved, first of all, how they analyzed their data, and then how they achieved saturation, because it's actually quite superficial.
So if we describe it adequately, that kind of table would probably not be necessary.
I mean, if you want to include that table as well, sure. Use all tools. Use as many tools at your disposal as you can. Seriously, absolutely, you can use it. But that in and of itself, to me, doesn't really say much in terms of saturation. But again, it's a combination, and it's also in the findings. It's also in the chapter 4. It's in the discussion of the findings. It's in the credibility of the findings. Like a lot of people, if the findings are just not convincing, I mean, that's when people start to question saturation, right? Or they see that there's not a lot of consistency between the data and the actual themes or the findings. They see things that don't relate, things that don't add up. They see things are not well, the findings themselves are not well described. That's when they start to question saturation. You know what I mean? So that's why chapter 3 and chapter 4 both are important for establishing saturation. It's not just in the methods, it's not just in the findings, it's the combination of both. So you need to really pay attention to both of those things. So I think use as many tools at your disposal as you can. And that's the whole point, is that you have to convince the reader that you've achieved saturation, because there is no p-value. It's not like statistics. You can just say, oh, p-value is, less than 0.05. We don't get that in qualitative. It's about making an argument for it. So it's like a lawyer in a courtroom. You have to show all the pieces of evidence to make a case for your finding. So yeah, so if you want to use that table, go ahead. I mean, it's additional evidence.
But by demonstrating the table, like what Bowen did, listing out the themes, the description, and the representative evidence for it, that actually demonstrates saturation in itself. It doesn't mean that we have to. I guess that means that we have to make sure that all the tables. In a thesis, I guess you can put all the tables in, but I'm just wondering, let's say in a manuscript, and you want to put saturation in a manuscript with... No,
cannot do it. That's why it's really challenging. In most qualitative manuscripts, they just state it. There's not a whole lot you can do in a manuscript to really prove saturation. They use the findings as the evidence, how well the findings are written up, how convincing the findings are. That's really, in a journal article, that's pretty much all you can do. And then of course they look at the general write-up of the methods. They will look at sample size. They will look at they'll look at how you talk about sampling adequacy and stuff like that. But it is really challenging in qualitative studies. Yeah, qualitative papers. It's really challenging.
Okay, thanks,
so
Rob.
This comes with the territory, actually. Okay, so let's take our break at 7:40, so we come back at 8 o'clock. Take a break. Okay, thank you to our presenters tonight.
Thank you, Prof.
Okay.
Thank you, Prof.
All right, so I'll see you in about 20 minutes, inshallah. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Okay, everyone, come back.
Yes, bro.
Yes,
okay, so for the rest of the class tonight, we're going to work together on our interview transcripts, on our analysis. So if you would all, as I gave you the heads up this morning on a WhatsApp group, I don't know, I'm assuming that you all saw that, but we're going to be using the interview transcripts in the Puja Blast on the folder. Hold on, let me show the folder on this. So if you go to the course handouts folder, here at the bottom, transcripts for class exercises. Okay, so you can get from there. So we're going to start, you can start by downloading Michelle. We're going to start, look at Michelle's transcript first, okay? So you can just download and open that up on your devices. All right. So let me first explain to you what we're going to do. So we're going to go through, we're going to begin to analyze these transcripts together using the same project. These are often the same project that you're going to be doing your coding assignment, your code book assignment on. Okay, so we can use the assignments folder and the description there in the assignments folder to guide us in our classwork. Okay, so but in the class we're going to do it together. So I'm going to sort of walk you through it, and we'll do it together. And that way you'll have a much clearer idea of how to do it for your assignment 5, okay? So we're going to try and kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Both, we're going to get practice analyzing data together in the class, and then you're going to also, it'll also give you an idea of how to go about doing your codebook assignment, okay? So that's the idea. So we're going to do it, we'll do it tonight for the remaining time in the class. We're also going to do it next week. And then for week 11 will be the in vivo course, in vivo tutorial class. So we'll do it in vivo tutorial that week. And then the following week, we're going to have an entire class devoted just to this. We're going to have a data analysis laboratory that week. And we're just going to do for the entirety of the class, we're going to practice our analysis. Okay, so we've got a considerable amount of time left to practice our coding and analysis. Okay, so what we're going to do tonight is we're going to go ahead and begin to analyze this data set by starting with the transcript from Michelle. Okay, so as you can see here, just to remind everyone from the previous week, this particular study that these transcripts come from is a real study that was done in the United States. And it's a study on how female undergraduate students make decisions about courses and careers in STEM, science, technology, engineering, math. Okay, and so that's what we're going to be analyzing this data about. And the study had, as you can see, had 1 main question and 3 sub-research questions. Okay, so we're going to focus on the 3 sub-questions. Okay. So we're going to focus on the first question of what influenced the young women, what influenced their choice of college to attend, okay? What influenced their choice of classes or courses to take, and then what influenced their choice of future career, okay? So I'm not sure in the class how much we're going to get through. We probably won't get through all 3 research questions in the class, but we're just going to do as much as we can with the time that we have, okay? It doesn't really matter how much we get done in the class. What matters is that you can do it. You can answer all 3 questions for your assignment 5. Okay, and then also, of course, to give us some experience in doing coding. Okay, and so our code book is going to contain the name of the category, definition of the category, and then the codes for each category, and then the quote or the data exemplar from the transcripts to support each of the codes. Okay, as I showed last week. All right, so let's first together, let's look at Michelle's transcript, if you would. Pull up Michelle. That's not Michelle. That's Michelle. Can you all see on the screen, it says there, Moss Winter 07 interviews?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so this is actually not the full transcript. The full transcript is closer to 20 pages, I think. Maybe 15, don't remember exactly, 15 to 20 pages. This one, I just took the first 6 pages for the purpose of the exercise, okay? And this is a pretty typical qualitative transcript for those of you who have not yet seen one. Okay, one thing you'll notice about a qualitative transcript is that they're usually double-spaced, not always, but usually. They are, of course, you have your sort of identifying information at the top. So usually there'll be more here. Usually it'll indicate also the place of the interview, the time of the interview, who was the interviewer. Okay, so they omitted some of that. But anyway, so we have Michelle here, and she's a junior in college, which means that she's in her 3rd year of undergraduate study. Okay, and the interviewer is named Gemma. Okay, and so you see the line numbers on the left. And why are the line numbers important? Who can tell me? Anyone?
Refer back.
For us to refer?
To refer back. Okay, what do you mean by refer back? Be more specific.
I mean, when you want to quote it, something that is stated by Michelle, you can straight away say, okay, it's stated at rows 29, something like that.
Yeah. Right, exactly. So it's for referencing the data. So when you want to pull out those quotes for your code book and you want to place them under the codes, you can identify the lines that whatever the quote was, where it's located in the transcript. Okay. So yeah, it's just for referencing, but it's useful. It's useful to have. So most qualitative transcripts will have line numbers. Okay. So let's now look at the first. So we're going to first start with the first research question. Okay. The first research question is, what influenced the young women's choice of college to attend? Okay. So each of them are attending a different university. And so the first question we want to know is, what were the influences on their choice of university or college to attend? Okay. So I'm trying to think now whether we should do this together or I should let you do it on your own first, and then we should go back and discuss. What do you guys think? You want to do it together, or do you want to do it on your own first?
Go together.
Really good.
Okay, but that means I'm going to have to do some. I'm going to have to read the transcript, like we're in kindergarten. I'm going to read the transcript to you. Okay, so just bear with me for a few minutes, okay, as I read to you. Okay, no one fall asleep. Okay, no one fall asleep, please. All right. So let's just look at this first transcript. So Michelle, so Gemma says here, hello, thank you for agreeing to talk with us. Your participation is really important. We are conducting a study that is designed to help us understand girls and young women's career decision-making. Okay, we're especially interested in your decisions about whether to pursue careers in science, technology, computer sciences, or math. With your help, we want to understand what kinds of things influence your thought process at different ages. So for example, what types of information or experiences help you decide what classes to take, or what kinds of things do you think about when considering a potential career? We have a list of questions we're going to discuss with you, but there may be things we don't think of or mention that you feel are important in trying to explain why you choose or don't choose certain types of study and career paths. At the end, we'll ask you if there's anything you want to add to the information we've asked. Are you ready? Okay, so that's an introduction to an interview. So basically explaining the purpose of the study, what they're trying to learn, what kind of questions they're going to ask. Okay, so that's kind of a sort of typical introduction. Okay, so Michelle says, okay, and just tell me a little bit about yourself. Okay, Michelle says, well, I'm a junior at Wellesley College. I'm majoring in neuroscience and I'm planning to go to medical school. I like the sciences, but also love the humanities, and I love literature and poetry. I also love music. I play piano and I play around on the guitar, and I love dancing. And yeah, I'm really enjoying my break. So you were telling me, Gemma says, you're telling me that you actually don't go back until when? January? Michelle, until the 27th. So I have a really long break to do whatever I want. Okay, so why did you choose Wellesley College? Okay, did little bells go off in your heads when you heard that question? Okay, what is interesting about this question?
Choice.
I heard a bunch of people. I didn't hear what you guys said. One at a time?
Open-ended question?
Preferences.
Yeah, but in terms of the research question we're trying to answer.
Okay.
Remember, the research question is, we want to understand what influenced the girl's choice in choosing a college, right?
Yeah, reason.
Yeah, so this question is a trigger. This is the interview question that is related to research question 1. Okay, so one of the things that you can do when you get your transcripts in your analysis is you can begin by doing structural coding. Okay, structural coding. So structural coding is where you go through the transcript and I first identify and pull out the text of the transcript that's related to each research question. Okay, so in my transcript here, I would make an indication somewhere this is Microsoft Word, this is not in vivo, but I'd make an indication here that, wait, I have to move my bar here. How do I do that? So I would just make an indication here, research question 1. Okay, because this is really where the data for research question 1 begins, because this is exactly, essentially, this is essentially what we want to know from our analysis. Okay, so Michelle says, I don't know. I actually I didn't apply to that many colleges. And my parents, my dad had gone to grad school at MIT, and they had led a church group, a small church group in the Boston area. And they would also tell me, oh, the Wellesley girls were the smartest and the prettiest. We want you to be a Wellesley girl. But I never really took it that seriously, but I applied anyway. And then it just kind of turned out that they were like giving me the most financial support, and I was interested in being near Boston. The only thing that was like kind of weird for me was the fact that it was all girls. But, you know, I decided it wouldn't be too hard. So I went over and I love it. I love it a lot. So then Gemma says, next question. So now that you've been at Wellesley for 3 years, the fact that it's all girls, does that bother you now? Okay, so Gemma asked this question about why did you choose Wellesley? And Michelle gives her answer here. Gemma doesn't follow up. She doesn't ask any follow-up questions there. She moves on to the next topic, okay? And one of the things about this study is that these interviews were also conducted by students. So, you know, the interviewing techniques are not the best. There are some areas where the interviewer didn't do much probing and stuff like that. So we won't worry about that at the moment, for the moment, okay? But what we can tell then is that from the way the data is structured, that basically the answer to research question 1 is going to be in here somewhere. Okay, because the question's here, and then Gemma doesn't do any probing. She moves on to the next topic. All right. And if you read the rest of the transcript, you'll find that she never, in this part of the transcript, she doesn't go back to this question about why she chose Wellesley, Michelle. Now, in the full transcript, I didn't give you the full transcript for this one, but you'll get it for your code book. You're going to get the full transcript. In the full transcript, Gemma actually goes back towards the end of the interview, and she goes back and she revisits this question about Wellesley. Okay, that's just a heads up for you guys. But for now, for the class exercise, we're not going to worry about that. I'm just going to facilitate the exercise, we're going to assume that and go on the idea that all the data that we need to answer this first question is here. So this is what we're going to code first. Okay, we're going to code this first paragraph, this first response by Michelle. Okay, so what would be a first code in relation to why Michelle chose Wellesley? Who would like to make a suggestion? Go ahead and read it. The first thing about data analysis that you have to really make sure you do religiously is that after you've done the transcribing, make sure you read through the transcript several times, okay? Because you need to become really familiar with the data, okay? I mean, really familiar with the data. The data should be like, you should know it like the back of your hand. Okay, first of all, you've conducted the interview. And then if you're a good student, you would have transcribed the interview yourself. So you would have had to listen to the interview again. All right, so you've already listened, so you've already gone through the interview twice. Now you're going to read through it. Okay, and when you read through it, that's going to give you even more insights into the data, but it's also going to acclimate you and familiarize you with the data. So you're going to really know the data. Okay, you're really going to get a feel for who Michelle is after you've gone through it a few times. Okay, so don't just get the transcript and jump in and start coding. First, read it carefully. Okay, because there's also issues of language at play. All right, so you can see like these are American, basically teenagers, older teenagers, young university students, and they speak like American teenagers. All right, so I don't know, like you see in the movies, right? I don't know. I actually I didn't have any, I don't know, that's like American teenagers the way they speak. So there's a lot of that language in there. So you have to sort of navigate through that kind of language to get to the content of what she's saying. Okay, so after all, I've said all that. So who would like to propose a first code?
Parents' opinions.
Okay, so tell me the line numbers I should code for parents.
My dad had gone to school.
Okay, what line numbers?
23.
26. 23.
23 until
26.
26.
25.
Like this.
27.
Jenny.
20.
Jenny.
5.
23 until 25.
23 to
Yes,
25.
25.
Like this. Okay. So you would code this as parents. Okay. Anyone else have any suggestions? Now, remember when we talk about first level coding, whether you call it open coding or you call it first level coding or descriptive coding, at the first level of coding, you want to be as close to the data as possible, as descriptive as possible. Okay, so parents, yes, definitely this is about parents. Okay, but
Reverend suggestion.
But okay, so never mind, I won't say anymore. Let's just code this as parents. Anyone else have any other suggestions?
Parents' preference.
Family background.
Culture group.
Family educational background.
Family educational background. Okay. Okay. So again, go back to the research question. Go back to the research question. Influence of the young girls on choosing their college. So the reason Michelle chose Wellesley, that's what we're looking at here. Okay, so parents, okay, parents' preference. Family educational background. Does that relate to her? How does that relate? Sorry, how does that relate to her choice of Wellesley?
No. From MIT.
I'm not sure who said family educational background. Who said that? Who said family educational background? Anybody want to claim your code?
It was me, Hanizan, bro.
Oh, Hanizan, sorry. I couldn't see the name of the speaker. Okay. So you're referring here to the fact that the father was at MIT? He was studying, he's doing his...
Yeah.
Oh, okay, all right. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just asking who said... Okay, so family... All right, so clearly you guys, there's some consensus here that it relates to the family or the parents. Okay, so we'll just leave it at that for now. That's fine. Okay, so second code, is there a second code after this first one?
Financial support.
Financial support. Okay, so what line numbers would that be, Rahma?
27.
27.
27. Yeah.
Up till here. Well, it's best just to code the whole sentence, right? So like this, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. And by the way, you know, if you want to do your first level coding in Microsoft Word, you can do it like this, just using the track changes. It's actually quite, and you have color, you know, you can use color text, highlighting the text in colors and stuff. It's actually quite useful. Financial assistance. And that is what we would call also what? What is that called? Financial support is also called what?
Vivo.
And Vivo, yes, it's an in vivo code, right? And so we know in vivo codes that are not the best, but they are the most representative of the data, right? And so in terms of description and in terms of being what we call being close to the data, they are the best because they are literally the words of the respondents. Okay, so that's a good one. Thank you, Rama, because it's literally an in vivo code from their words. Okay, any other codes?
Personal preference, Prof?
Maizura, where do you see personal preference? Tell me the data that speaks to personal preference.
Line 26, I never took it seriously, but I applied anyway. So it seems that, yeah, whatever people said, I still have my own preference. Can I assume like that?
Okay, personal preference.
So what about professional support, Doctor? Professional support?
Professional
support?
Where do you see professional support? What data? What line number?
Line 52, 53, and 54.
Oh no, we're just looking at these at lines 22 to 29 right now.
Sorry, Doctor.
Yeah, what you see on the screen is what we're looking at right now.
Location.
Yeah, all person
Location. Okay, so where is location?
I was
Near
interested
It
in
was
being near Boston.
I was interested in being near Boston.
Good, you guys are sharp. Okay, location. Okay, anything else?
Maybe gender factor?
Maybe gender factor. As to why she chose Wellesley?
Yeah.
Okay, where does it say
Where's
that?
the
Where do you see that?
26?
26? 26?
Sorry, 26, yeah. 25 and 26.
Okay, so it says here, the parents would say, this is the parent speaking, right? Oh, the Wellesley girls were the smartest and prettiest. We want you to be a Wellesley girl. And then Michelle says, but I never really took it that seriously, but I applied anyway. So is it what you call the gender factor, or is it the fact that it came from the parents? See, I think this first code here reflects the fact that you guys seem to agree that it was the influence of the parents, right? So by them sort of making those kind of comments, it sort of got her to apply, right? So I don't think it's the gender factor. I think it's the parents factor here. Okay, if you read the data carefully, and that's why you have to really read your data carefully. You have to really read the data carefully. Okay, so we'll leave that one as parents. Okay. All right, so that's it. These are basically, you guys got it. Basically, these are the reasons, or these are the codes for this first question for Michelle. Okay, so we have. I mean, I'll just use parents just because, for the sake of ease for the exercise. We'll use parents, financial support, location. We'll include personal preference, and we can include it. Again, when you're doing your first level open coding phase, it's okay. It's actually encouraged to overcode. In other words, if you see codes, you're not sure, but you think there's something there, go ahead and code it. You can always remove it later. It may turn out to be nothing, but if you really think that there's something there, it's okay to code it. So we will, we'll just include this personal preference as well. Okay. So what we would do now is we would begin to build our code book. So we just put RQ1. Okay. Choice of college to attend. All right. And so we have our first code is family. And we have financial support. And then we have personal preference. And we have location. Okay, so you have your first codes for your code book. All right. Notice I didn't put Michelle here. Notice I did not put Michelle here, because when you're building your code book, it doesn't matter who is the source of these codes, right? So this is after Michelle's interview. After the next interview, I'm going to add to this list of codes, right? So I'm not going to have separate lists for Michelle and a separate list for the next respondent and a separate list for the next respondent. My code book is one list of codes that we build on with every interview. Okay? Is that clear?
Yes, Rob.
One question, Prof.
Yeah. Question, go ahead.
So the research question, we said it already or what?
Sorry, we what already?
We said the question first and then we write it back.
The question, this is the research question. The research question of the study.
Yeah.
This is the research
first.
Sorry?
We do it first.
You do it first. You do what first?
Question, yeah. We do it first. Before we get
what do you
answer.
mean? What do you mean we do it first?
Actually, we kita dah sediakan dulu soalan tu.
Yeah lah.
We made
Your
the
research.
question first.
These are the
Before
main.
we go to.
Yeah, these are the main questions for that you're trying to answer for your study.
Okay.
This should be in your proposal. You're in chapter 1. Your research questions. This is the heart of your study, right? So all your analysis is geared towards answering these research questions.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, those research questions are your guide for you doing your analysis. Okay.
Prof?
Yeah.
Maizura here. Prof, so in that case, right, because last week we did discuss on this, right? You were saying about inductive theory is where, or inductive way whereby you use research question and you identify the thematic analysis from this research question. So this is one of the way to find codes, whereby another way is through theory. Is it true, Prof?
Yeah. Yes, good question. So this is the inductive approach, yes. So this is the inductive. If we were, of course, we haven't done any literature review. We haven't done any background literature review of this study, of this topic. And we have no coding framework to begin with. This is purely inductive. But in your case, you may have some pre-existing codes that you might want to use when you go through and conduct your coding, right? From your literature review, you may have those. Okay, so it's really up to you, but that should be explained in your chapter 3, whether you're using, to what extent you're using theory to conduct your coding and so forth. But this is entirely completely inductive.
All right. So it means that using research question just one of the way to create a code.
No, research question is the same.
One of the way.
No, if you're using deductive theory-driven codes, you're also trying to answer the research question. It's the same.
Okay.
It's just that you have existing codes that you can apply to the text. You can apply to the data. So, for example, let's just say that there's a theory on, student choice in universities, and these concepts like personal preference and financial support and location are from theory. We would do the same thing. We would go through the data and we'd say, okay, personal preference, right, or whatever. And then after we've applied all of our deductive codes, then we would go back through it again and do the remaining text using the inductive approach to complement the deductive.
Professor, I have to make this question myself to read this interview.
The question, what question?
I have to make this question myself.
What question?
As my assumption.
What questions are you talking about, Mr. Nazrum?
You wrote this question, RQ1.
Yeah, the research question are from the study. Okay, so remember I showed on the Pucho Blast here. Okay, this is all about.
No, not that.
These are the research questions.
I think interview protocol.
Yeah, I think you mentioned about the interview protocol, Prof. Because when we have a research question, then we have to create a question for our interviewee.
Yeah.
Then they didn't know about the interview, and then they are confused about how come the question like that.
Okay, so yeah, these are questions from the interview protocol. I wrote research question 1 here because I was just I was doing a little structural coding. So remember I said, to do structural coding, what you do is when you first get your transcript, you can block off, or you can literally code those portions of the interview that refer to the different research questions. So for example, in an interview guide, you have your interview guide, you may have, say you have 9 questions in the interview guide, right? So typically in an interview guide, the questions are broken down according to research questions. So maybe the first 3 interview questions refer to research question 1, the second 3 to research question 2, the last 3 to research question 3, okay? So what you do is when you get your transcript, you can code and identify the data in the transcript that refers to each research question. Okay, that's why I wrote research question 1. This question here, along with this data, is all related to research question 1. Okay, so that's why I wrote research question 1 here. So I apologize if that was confusing. Okay, so I was just giving an example of structural coding. Okay, so structural. So it helps so that you can you can sort of segment your interview transcript for the analysis, right? So you can go through and analyze for each of those research questions accordingly based on the text that's there. All right, so any other questions? Are we good?
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
How do we handle a response from a participant that says something along what Michelle said earlier, like, oh, I don't really know. For example, I say, that person said, I just applied and I got accepted. So I'm here. That's the only thing that she answered. How do we handle that kind of?
Well, if you're a good interviewer, you would ask her, you would probe a bit after that and say, you'd ask you'd ask some follow-up questions to try and get her to elaborate. Can you explain a bit more about, did you have a system for choosing, or, it's okay to feed a little bit, you know what I mean? Like if you see they're really having a hard time elaborating, it's okay to not necessarily put words in their mouth or give them the answers or whatever, but just to sort of provoke them a little bit. Well, can you talk about, your decision making? Can you talk about the process you used to decide? Was it from, did your parents influence you? Stuff like that, just to get them going and provoke them a little bit. That's where your interview skills really have to come in.
Okay, bro.
Yeah, but it's true though, you may get some people that just cannot really elaborate, especially like my experience interviewing young people, especially like teenagers. Sometimes the questions, they just haven't thought much about them, in the context of their lives, and they don't really have much to say about some topics. So there's really not much you can do about that. If they haven't really thought about it, they haven't thought about it, and they really have nothing to say. That's one reason why I personally I really prefer to share my questions prior to interviews, and really encourage the participants to read the questions before the interview, so that they actually do a little bit of thinking before the interview. Because if they've thought about the question before the interview, usually their responses are much better than if they just get it, like, as soon as the interview starts, you give them the questions and or you ask them on the spot, they're sort of like shell-shocked. Like they don't know really, sometimes they just don't know what to say. But if you give them the questions ahead of time, you let them prepare a little bit, let them think about it ahead of time, then usually they will give you much richer data. Okay, so that's just it's encouraged in the literature for the most part, and it's just, I've found from practice it really works a lot better. Okay, so that's I think a good idea also to do that. All right.
Thank you for the tip, Prof.
Sorry.
Thank you for the tips, Prof.
Oh, sure. Now let's open up. Now let's go to Mary Catherine. Can you guys open up Mary Catherine's? So we've already coded for the first research question. We've already coded Michelle. Okay, we've got as you can see there, our code book is beginning to develop. We've got 4 codes for research question 1 for choice of college to attend. All right, and we've got 4 codes there: family, financial support, personal preference, and location. Now let's move on to Mary Catherine. Okay, so if you can open up Mary Catherine. Now, this one is considerably, her response is considerably longer. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you guys go ahead and do it yourselves. Okay, since I walked you through the first one, I think you have an idea what to do. I'm going to let you code that first research question by yourselves, and then we'll just we'll report back and discuss together. Okay, so why don't you go and take a few minutes and try and code Mary Catherine's transcript for research question 1. Okay. And first, try to, again, like I did last time, try to first identify which text, do a structural coding and to identify the text where research question 1 starts. All right. Is that okay? We do it by ourselves, this one?
Prof.
Yes, Prof.
Yes, Razia.
So we did not read all the interview transcript 1. Maybe we can find the answer in another question, maybe for the research question number 1.
You mean for Michelle?
Yeah. Maybe
Well,
we have to, we are not read all of the interview transcript before we go to the next interviewee, or we just go focus on the research question, Prof.
Okay, no, obviously if it was a real study, you would read the whole interview, you'd read the whole transcript. Okay. Just for the sake of exercise, I'm just telling you that there's no more data for research question one. Okay, in the first transcript. Okay, just for the sake of exercise. Okay, just to make it easier. But of course, by right, you'd read the whole transcript, and that's why you would do structural coding, Razia, because data related to research question one might come up again later in the interview, and so you want to identify that using a structural code, right? So maybe the first page they talk about research question one, so you code that as research question one, and then maybe again on page 8 she revisits research question one, so you go ahead and you code that under research question one as well, right? Using a structural code to start with. Then you go back and you do your open coding, etc., for research question one. Okay. But I'm just, for the sake of exercise, I'm making it easy. I'm just telling you that there's no more data. Okay, so Mary Catherine, go ahead and read the first part here where she answers research question one, and try and come up with the codes yourself, and then we'll have a sharing in a little bit. Okay, I'll give you a few minutes to do that. Go ahead. Okay, we ready? Do we need more time?
Okay, Prof.
Okay. Everyone else? Can we start? We only got 15 more minutes, so I think we'll just get going. So we'll finish Mary Catherine tonight, and then next week we can continue with the other two ladies for research question 1. Okay. And so we'll just continue on this. Okay. So who would like to go first? So at what line number do they start talking about research question 1?
27?
Yeah, well, 20, the question,
26.
yeah, right. The question's at 26. So
The
here.
question is 26.
Yeah, so here we have, so what made you choose Notre Dame? So she goes to a university called Notre Dame, which is a Catholic university, okay, as you could probably figure out from the discussion. And so this is where they start talking about research question 1. Okay, so who would like to go first? What is your first code for Mary Catherine in terms of her choice of choosing Notre Dame?
Location?
Okay,
Family?
What line numbers refer to location, Maizuro?
27. I look at a lot at the schools in North Carolina.
Okay. Okay. Oh, so this is, yeah, so sorry. This is an issue of, so in the US, actually Notre Dame is not in North Carolina. Actually, Notre Dame is in a state called Indiana. But Mary Catherine is from North Carolina. Actually, all these girls in the study are from North Carolina because the camp was in North Carolina that they attended, where they did the study. So I apologize. That's background information about the study.
Right. So this location would not.
Yeah.
Would be not her preference.
Yeah. So she started out by looking at a lot of schools in North Carolina, but she doesn't say that she wanted to go to school in North Carolina. She just says, I looked at a lot of schools in North Carolina. In the end, okay, blah, blah, blah. But she ended up going to Notre Dame, which is in a different state. So yeah, so location, at least here, it's not an issue for her.
Okay, family, Prof?
Family, okay. What line numbers refer to family?
So, number 30.
Okay, so are you referring to this here?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, all right, so family. So her auntie went there. Okay. Next.
How about college
support?
background?
Hanizan, what was it again? Sorry.
Line 28 and 29, I'm thinking about college background. So all of the school, I look at it, I thought Notre Dame would be the best options of my major. Perhaps something really college background.
Yeah, I think if you just keep going, I think this next sentence is also it's the same idea.
Yes.
So
quality of certificate.
Sorry?
Quality of degree.
Yeah. That's I think yeah. I think you're both onto it. You both got it. She's referring that regardless of major, it's just a good degree to have. I mean, from this school. So it's just So we'll just say what did you who was that said that? I'm sorry. Was that Augustine? Was that you, Augustine? So
yeah.
How would you code that? Good degree? No, you said quality, right? Quality or something? Quality of degree.
Professor,
I think that's a good way of putting it. Sorry, Nazrul, what did you say?
Line number 29, Notre Dame. I thought Notre Dame. And code maybe first preference.
First preference.
Yeah.
Where does it say that Notre Dame was their first preference?
I thought learning.
Learning. Where does it talk about learning? I don't understand. Where does it talk about learning?
So of all the schools looked at, I thought Notre Dame would be the best opinion regardless my major.
Right. It's a great degree no matter what you study. So what she's referring to there is that regardless of what you study there at Notre Dame, just having a degree from Notre Dame is good because it has a good reputation, in other words. Okay, so like Augustine and Hanizan said that she's referring there to the quality of the degree based on the, just based on the reputation of the school. That's what she's referring to there. Okay, so again, try to make sure you read carefully. Of course, there's also language issues here. These are American teenagers and they speak with a very sort of American dialect. So I understand that, and this is really true of qualitative research. You have to be aware of the cultural background of your participants. So if you're interviewing people from a background that's different than yours, make sure that you have some way of interpreting the language, and you're sure and clear of what they're saying. Sometimes it's helpful to get others to help you to look at the data, or even to go back to the respondents and ask them to clarify and stuff like that. Okay, so that's why language is very important in qualitative research.
Culture sharing, page 31 and 32.
31 is what?
Religion factor?
Culture.
Okay, so now let's look at this statement about culture. So she says, and I went to visit, and it was just the whole feel and the whole culture I really liked. Okay. Yeah. Now be careful of the word culture, because what she's saying there in terms of culture is not literally culture like eating and dress and all that. She's just talking about the feel of the university. Now, the reason why we know that this is not about culture, because Gemma, as a good qualitative interviewer, she follows up that statement by asking the question, what is it about the feel of Notre Dame and the culture that you liked? In other words, Gemma is not clear really what she means there by culture. So she asks a probing question. Okay, this is a good example of a probing question. That's why you would never code that as culture, because she's not really talking about culture. She's talking about the feel of the place, the ethos of the place, And so Gemma's not really sure what she means. She wants to know more specifically. Well, what do you mean exactly? What is it that you liked? Tell me what you liked. Okay. So she asks a good follow-up question. Mary Catherine says what? So what does Mary Catherine say about the culture?
The university is a Catholic university. It's very big.
Okay.
And also surrounded by many buildings. Also, most of the intelligent people are there.
Yeah, she's saying all those things. So what would be the next code? How would you code all that?
Selected university, or maybe popular.
Or repetitions of the school repetitions.
Okay, try not to read too much into the data. Try to describe what you're reading. Okay.
Catholic university.
Religious belief.
Yeah, it's a Catholic university. So she's a Catholic.
It can be location. Next
religious.
So okay, it's a Catholic university, and that's a big part of it, to go up there and be sort of surrounded by other Catholics.
Young Catholics.
Preferences?
Well, preferences, yeah, but specifically what kind of preferences?
Is it a religious belief, Prof?
Yeah.
Religious background.
Yeah, religious community. I mean, it's community. It's having that, being in that religious community, right? Or religious, you call it religious background, religious university, religious school, but it's definitely about religion, right? It's about it's about being a Catholic. You can even say Catholic, religious. You have both to start with. Open coding, you can be flexible. You don't have to be like so rigid. So you can say religious or Catholic community. All right. But she's clearly talking about being surrounded by other Catholics. That means that sense of belonging because of the religious background. Okay. It could even be religious background, right? Community or background. All right. So you can be flexible with open coding. Don't be so rigid. All right. And then she says what after that?
Student and academic performance.
Yeah, it's very academic. Like everyone going there is very intelligent. Okay, so she's describing the student body, the other students, as being right. So you could say academically serious. Whoa, sorry, typing problem there. Serious, intelligent body. Something like that. Again, the specific words you use for the codes, you may have them slightly different. I'm just giving you the idea. Okay, so. All right. And then she says what?
Not competitive.
Right. So she likes the fact it's not competitive. So people that are intelligent, they take academics seriously, but it's not overly competitive, right? Like she says, like other schools may be. Okay. Because a lot of universities where, you have a lot of smart people or intelligent people, there's that ultra competitiveness that becomes like a pressure cooker, right? But she's saying that it's nice, it's not competitive. Okay. Then when she says what? So it's saying she just repeats this one, reiterates this one.
Modest.
Yeah, so she reiterates smart. Everyone keeps themselves and everyone's very modest. Okay. So who would like to name the code for that one?
Student characteristics.
Sorry?
Student characteristics.
Yeah. Student characteristics. Yes, they're student characteristics, but be specific. What is it saying about student characteristics? Remember, you want to describe
students. Modest.
Kind.
Yeah, you could use modest. She uses modest, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I think modest captures it. Okay, then what?
Sports option.
Yeah, sports. So it's very famous for its sports. Okay, so
sports options.
Yes, sports.
Sports activities for students.
Okay, that's good. All right, so something like that. All right, and then Gemma asked another question about competitiveness in high school, right? So she talks about high school, and then that's it, right? Then she moves on. Okay, so research question 2, remember, is about what influence their courses that they take, right? So this is, you can see here, this is the start of research question 2. Whenever they start asking about courses, it's in reference to research question 2. Okay, and some of this is just follow-up, you get that a lot in qualitative studies. Sometimes you ask follow-up questions. You're not really sure if it's going to lead to anything substantive, but you just sort of ask it because you feel it's something you may want to probe deeper. Okay, but this doesn't really refer to anything in terms of her choice, in terms of what college she ended up at. Okay, so for research question 1, this is pretty much our data here. Okay, so we've got quality of degree, family, religious or Catholic community or background. You've got an academically serious, intelligent student body. It's not a competitive atmosphere. The students tend to be modest, and there's lots of sports and activities for students. Okay. So it's really important also that when you first get your transcripts, you also profile your respondents. Okay. So through your reading of the transcript as a whole, you should be able to write a profile of that person based on their responses. Okay. And then some will even do, at the end of the study, they'll do a composite profile, like they'll do a profile of the entire sample, all right, where you're giving a description of the individual. So it really helps so that you maintain a sense of the whole. So as we do coding, what we're doing is we're breaking down the data, we're deconstructing the data into these little itty bitty pieces, but it's really important that we maintain a sense of the whole. In other words, what is this sort of whole story here? And so from these codes, we get a sense in terms of Mary Catherine, we get a sense of what she likes in the university, right? You know, she wants a good school, regardless of degree. You know, she wants to be, she happens, you know, maybe it's a place where her family went. That gives it a sense of sort of, what's the word? Credibility in some way, you know, that she had a family member that went there. You know, she likes being in a religious in a religious kind of setting with academically serious students. They're not competitive, modest. So it gives us an idea of who she is also as a person. And that's really important when you do qualitative research. These are human beings, you know, we really want to situate it within their lives. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and transfer these codes to our code book quickly, because it's already 9 o'clock. I understand that. Okay, so we've got family. Oh, sorry. What's the first one? Quality of degree. I'll do this quickly. Okay, we've got family again, so I don't have to recode that, or I don't have to paste that again because it's already in the code book. Oops. Ah, wrong file. All right. Sorry, I'm taking you guys in injury time now, after 9 o'clock. All right, so we have one, from the first two interviews, we have one repeating code, which is what? Family, right. So we have one repeating code. The rest are all new codes. So clearly we have not reached saturation point yet. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up and fill in the data for this code book here. And so we'll start from here next week with the next interview, and we'll keep building. And then so by the fourth interview of research question 1, we're going to have actually a nice little code book. You'll see by the time we finish the first 4 interviews. All right. I'll go ahead and work on this for next class. Okay. Any questions? It's already past 9. I apologize for keeping you. So any questions so far?
Yes, Doctor, I have a question.
Professor, yeah. I have a question.
Okay, go ahead. Somebody?
Yes, Victor. Is the researcher must analyze first question in his research first for all of his participants, or analyze all questions in first participant and so on and go on?
No, ideally you should analyze as you go. You shouldn't wait until you've collected all your data and then start analyzing. So you should be analyzing after each interview. Okay. So the same way we've done it here, except of course, obviously you'd code all the data for all the research questions, not just research question 1. I'm just doing it this way for exercise sake. We're just going to do it by research question. But what you would do is you'd code the whole transcript for all the research questions first, and then you do go to the second interview, and then do the coding for all the research questions for the the whole. You code the whole transcript. Does that answer your question?
So what about if a new thing? Yes. So what about if a new issue arrives?
What about what? Sorry.
If a new issue arises, or a new concept, a new theme.
Yeah. The new themes will arise as you do it this way. As we go through and we develop, as our codes develop, they will become bigger categories and themes with each new data set you get. With those findings, your emerging findings will develop.
Okay, thank you, Prof.
Yeah, you'll see it more clearly next week once we finish this first research question. You'll see how it evolves.
Professor, I have a question.
Yeah, Nazrul.
I want to know about saturation topic. My question is, how can saturation help to count number of interviews or participant?
How can saturation what? Sorry?
How can saturation help to count number of interviews or participant?
I'm not sure I understand your question. Saturation doesn't help you count interviews. Saturation is a result of, as we just discussed during the article discussion, it results from data adequacy. Once you've reached that point where there's no new findings coming into what you've come up with, it doesn't really refer to numbers. I'm not really sure what you mean. Can you be more specific?
So, I mean, saturation does help define boundaries.
It does help affect boundaries.
Yeah.
What kind of boundaries are you referring to?
Boundaries mean it can be borderline.
I'm not really clear. I'm not really sure what you're asking. I'm sorry, Nazrul. It's not clear. Your question is not clear to me.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, if you can write it, maybe you can write the question and send it to me. Maybe that'll help.
Okay, I will send you.
Okay, okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Anything else? Any other one? No?
Prof, I have question, but I'll keep this question for next week. Is it okay?
It's up
Before
to you.
class starts?
It's up to you. Yeah, sure.
Right, okay.
Okay. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much. So we will continue with this next week, inshallah.
Thank you, Prof.
All right.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank
Have
you,
a good
Prof.
week. Have a good week. See you next week, inshallah.
Assalamualaikum.
Okay, assalamualaikum.
Thank you, Prof.
Ama.
Good night, Prof.
Good night.
Good night.